Okay na?
Okay na.
So hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the themes, styles, settings, narrative voice that is being used that is being associated in the story Half a Day of Mapus, and also the historical context of Egyptian in the 20th century, and also the Egyptian myth. So our objectives is at the end of this discussion, students are expected to first analyze and understand the themes, style, setting, and the narrative voice shown in the novel Half a Day by Mahfouz. And also, the second one, we need to identify the historical context of Egypt during the 20th century. And the last one is to compare and contrast the historical context of Egypt before and today. And the first one we need um, the first one we have the theme of the short story Half a Day. So what is theme? So theme is being defined as the main idea eh, or an underlying meaning of a literary work which may be stated directly or indirectly. So when we say theme, is the main idea or the central idea of a certain story or a certain literature. So, Miss Rowena, may I ask you a question? So, what are the themes that is being associated in the story Half a Day by Mathus?
Okay, so for me, like what I have said earlier in my report, it is about the storyline. I mean the life of a person wherein it was started when he was a child and then ended up in as a old man.
Okay, very good. So, here, we have five themes that is being associated in the story Half a Day. So the first one, we have the life or the human condition. So the next one, we have the major adaptation, coming of age, time, memory, and old age. And also we have the cycle of life. So the story Half a Day use allegory in which everything in the story has its deeper meaning. So aside from its literal meaning. So in this story, it views how the narrator spent his entire lifetime in the school. So everything that occurs in this story represent common experience of the human condition, such as birth, childhood, old age, and also the death and the afterlife and the pain that we encounter in our life, the fears, and as well as the cycle of life from being a childhood to adult, and it is being passed from generation to generation. So also, this story, Half a Day, portrays tra- the transition of the narrator from childhood to adulthood. So when his father sent him away from home, he introduces the school and describe it as a place in which boys become men. So the gate of the schoolyard represents the first step of his transition from being a child to adulthood. So, furthermore, the title Half a Day indicates the story's central concern with the human experience of time and memory. So, the narrator emerged from the gates of the school and aware that his life has passed and that is now no longer a young boy but an old man. So specifically, this story reflects on how fast and quick time passes. So yesterday we are little children, today we are teenager, and maybe tomorrow we will be an old people. So we need to appreciate things that we experience today. So wag nating madaliin yung mga bagay na nararanasan natin ngayon, because in the end of the day, we are the one who will suffer from it. And we are so lucky that we are given time to do things and be better, because for some people, they don't have enough time. So we want to grow up already and be adults. So but when we do reach adulthood, we long for our childhood days. So meron tayong sometimes we think na sana maging matanda na ako para magawa ko na yung mga gusto ko. But pero kapag na-reach na natin yung point na yon that we are already adult, um, sometimes nagiging kwan tayo na sana maging bata ako ulit. So, yun yung naging theme netong story na to. And also, lastly, um, the story is concerned with the three stages of life. So, we have childhood to middle age and middle age to adult age. So, we are all passed through this cycle of life that we became a child, um, we will become a teenager, and so on. We will become an adult. So, meaning the themes of this story, it only focuses on the transition of lives and the cycle of life, and understood what is the themes that being associated in the story Half a Day.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let's proceed to the style that is being used in the literary piece Half a Day. So the style that is being used, the style is the literary element that describes the ways that the author uses words. So the style that is being used in the literary piece Half a Day is allegory. So when we say allegory, it is a story with events and characters not meant to be interpreted at a literal level, but a symbolic one. So when we say allegory, it talks about based aside from its literal meaning, there is a deeper meaning, or a symbolic meaning behind this story. So Mahfouz uses the style allegory in his work entitled Half a Day. Um, an allegory is a story with events and characters not meant to be interpreted at a literal level, but a symbolic one. So it means that aside from the literal meaning of the story, it has also remained meaning beyond its literal meaning. So the story Half a Day is an allegory of life and human condition, because everything occurs in the story represent common experience of human condition, like the birth, the childhood, old age, and also the transition from the childhood to adulthood. So also it is being observed in this story um, the transition of the main character, or the narrator, from being a child to adulthood when he's sent from to the school, and that's it. So the style of uh, the literary piece is allegory. So next we have the setting. So we all know that setting is the location and time frame in which the action of the narrative takes place. So this is the location and where the actions takes place. So in the story Half a Day, we see that the setting of the story is too general. So because of the author did not specifically write the exact place where the story takes place. So but it is being told that the story takes place almost in the schoolyard. So the schoolyard refers to the school of life. So the cave of the schoolyard represent the important stage of transition in the life of the author, and the author first passes through the gate in order to see the transition from childhood and adulthood. So the next one we have the narrative voice. So narrative voice it is refers to who tells the story. So who is being who narrates the story. So the first one, the narrative voice used in the story has a transition. So at the beginning, the main character is a young boy, and by the end of the story, the narrator is an old man. So at first, uh, at first, the writer used the first person singular I, which represent himself. And however, at the end of the story, the writer used the first person plural we. So to describe school as a group experience to speak from the perspective of the common experience of all the children. So the writer describes the story, the experience of the human condition so that the narrator used the experiences in school in which everyone can relate and understood because we all humans experience the same thing in life, the time and the memory. So the next, now let's proceed to the historical context of the Egypt in the 20th century. So we have a sequence here of sequence of years, or the timeline. So the first one we have 1992. 1992 is um, when Egypt gains independence from British rule. The next one we have 1948, where Israel is established as an independent state. And also we have 1952, when a military coup overthrew the Egyptian monarchy. And the next one we have the 1967, or the Six Day War, where the Six Day War occurred. So the Six Day War was a brief but bloody conflict fought in June 1967 between Israel and Arab states of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Following years of diplomatic friction and skirmishes between Israel and its neighbors. So Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, launched preemptive airstrikes that crippled the air forces of Egypt and its allies. So Israel then staged a successful ground offensive and seized to be Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and Golan Heights from Syria. And the brief war ended with a UN broke ceasefire, but it significantly altered the map of the Mid East and gave rise to layering geopolitical friction. So 1977, where Six-Day War was then occurred. The next one is Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur on October 6, 1973, hoping to win back territory lost to Israel during the Third Arab-Israeli War in 1967, Egyptian and Syrian forces launched a coordinated attack against Israel on Yom Kippur. So the holiest day of Jewish calendar, taking the Israeli Defense Forces by surprise. So Egyptian troops swept deep in the Sinai Peninsula, while Syria struggled to throw occupying Israeli troops out of the Golan Heights. So Israel counterattacked the recaptured the Golan Heights, and a ceasefire went into effect on October 25, 1973. And lastly, we have 1977, where Egypt, Israel conclude peace treaty. So at a ceremony on the White House South Lawn, presided over the President Jimmy Carter, that took place on this day in 1979, Egypt and Israel having fought for war since 1948. So signed a formal peace treaty. So Egyptian President Anwar Sadat from 1989 to 1981 and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin from 1913 to 1992 signed the agreement of the peace treaty um, between Egypt and Israel. So the accord came 16 months after the Sadat have traveled to Jerusalem. So an unprecedented move by an Arab leader that arranged mass of the Muslim world. So to meet with Begin and address the Israeli parliament in September 1978, the two leaders met again, another charters in the United States where the negotiated a framework deal known as the Camp David Accord. Yon. So that is the timeline of the Egyptian literature in where Egypt and Israel was concluded with a peace treaty. Next, let's move on to the Egyptian myth. So the first Egyptian myth is Isis and Osiris, or the murder and revenge. So Isis and Osiris myth were two of the four children of Nut, the earth goddess. So Isis and Osiris were married as the eldest child Osiris ascended the throne and the people love him but his brother Seth was jealous of this and sought revenge. So Seth killed Osiris, cut him into pieces, and dispersed the pieces all over Egypt. So Isis, however, had great magical powers. She traveled across the land and collected all the pieces of Osiris, breathed life back into them, and resurrected him. Soon they conceived a child together, Horus, but Osiris could not return to the land of the living and went on to rule the underworld. So Isis is the goddess in Egyptian mythology. Uh, she was known she was known as the goddess of the moon, as goddess of life and magic. So is Isis protected women and children and healed the sick. So she was the sister and wife of Osiris. Isis and Osiris had son named Horus. So next one we have Osiris. Osiris is a god of disease. So he was the son of the oldest child, Gab, the earth deity, and Not, the sky goddess, and he is the sky goddess. His wife and sister was Isis, goddess of motherhood, magic, fertility, death healing, and rebirth. It was said that Osiris and Isis was deeply in love with each other even in the womb. Ayan. So, ayan yung um, that are the uh, background of Isis and Osiris in the murder and revenge. Next, we will talk about the myth about Horus and Seth. So let's first talk about who is Horus. So Horus is the falcon head god, is is a familiar ancient Egyptian god. So he has become one of the most commonly used symbols of Egypt, seen on Egyptian airplanes and on hotels and restaurants throughout the land. So Horus is the son of Osiris and Isis, the divine child of Holy Family Triad. So next one we have Set. So Set is also known as Seth, and Shufek was he was the Egyptian god of war, chaos, and storm, brother of Osiris, Isis, and Horus the elder, uncle to Horus the younger, and the brother husband of Nephthys. His other consort was the goddess Taweret and Hippo had headed deity who presided over the fertility and childbirth. So the myth Horus and Seth, the myth of Horus and Seth, and when Horus grew to be a man, he challenged Seth to the throne. A series of battles ensued, but to no surprise, Seth did not play fair and kept coming out the victor. So eventually, Isis stepped in to help Horus. So she set for a trap for Seth, but he begged her for his life and she let him go. This infuriated Horus. His rage was so strong that it even upset the other god. In a final match, a boat race, it looked like Horus was going to be the victor. So infuriated, Seth turned into a hippopotam- hippopotamus and attacked Horus' boat. So yet another fight ensues, and their fellow gods declared the match a tie. So in the end, Osiris was consulted to see who should be king. Osiris declared that no man should take the throne through murderous ways as Seth had. So in the end, Horus took his rightful place while his father continued to rule the underworld. So next one we have Ma'at, the god of mortality, the myth of Ma'at. Um, Ma'at was the goddess of harmony, justice, and truth, and represented as young woman. Sometimes she is depicted with wings on each arm or as a woman with an ostrich feather on her on her head. The meaning of this emblem is uncertain. So although the god Shu, who in some myths is Ma'at's brother, also wears it. So in the myth of Ma'at, the goddess of morality, Ma'at was the goddess of truth, justice, and morality. She was the daughter of Ra and the wife of the moon god Thoth. So she weighed the hearts of the dead to decide who should have eternal joy in afterlife. So her feather of truth was the determining factor. So once placed on a scale, if the deceased heart was heavier than her feather, they would not be permitted to journey to paradise. So if the heart was deemed too heavy, a demon would devour it, causing the disease to die a second time. So lastly, we have Anubis. So a death myth. So Anubis is the Egyptian god of mummification. So or the afterlife as well, the patron god of lost soul at the helpless. So he is one of the oldest gods of Egypt who was likely developed from the earlier. So jackal god Wepmawep, with whom he is often confused. So in the myth, Anubis, a death myth, Anubis was an ancient Egyptian god who had many roles around death. So he was initially the lord of the dead, but as Osiris became more popular, he took over the role. Anubis' story was then changed and he became Osiris' son and helper in the afterlife. So Anubis was the protector of tombs and inventor of mummification. He was also tasked with taking the dead souls to the underworld and overseeing the weighing of the heart. So that's all for today, and I hope you learn a lot. You learn a lot from the themes, the settings, the style, and also the narrative voice that is being associated in the short story Half a Day, and also the historical context of Egypt and also its myth. So I hope that you learn a lot and have a great day ahead and see you next meeting. Thank you.